everyone, my name is Sasha. Today I will be guiding you through how I would draw an isometric drawing. I will cover multiple things in this video. The first thing I will cover is what is an isometric drawing. If you already know what an isometric drawing, I would recommend skipping over that part directly onto the next step. The second step that I will cover is how I go about starting a drawing, from rough sketches to getting an idea, a story, finding references, to making a final sketch. The next step will be how to transform that sketch into an isometric lined drawing. And finally, the last step will be how I go about coloring a painting. So let's start by taking a look at what an isometric drawing is. Don't be intimidated by this complicated name. An isometric drawing is actually a very simple concept to grasp, and even more of a simple concept to put into practice. An isometric drawing is essentially a three-dimensional representation of an object on a two-dimensional surface. What is particular about an isometric drawing is that it is a representation of an object that isn't affected by any distortion. When we look at things through a lens, it distorts reality. We all know that a defining characteristic of a cube in real life is that its two edges are parallel, of course, or else it wouldn't be a cube. However, if I was to take a photo of a cube, I would notice that prolonged, these edges end up meeting somewhere, therefore not appearing parallel. They would meet at a point that we call a vanishing point. Our eye operates just the same way as a camera lens would. That is why things appear smaller the further they get. We see in perspective. A drawing in perspective can have up to 6 vanishing points. The more vanishing points, the more distorted it gets. It comes without saying that an isometric drawing would include no vanishing point and no horizon line. That is one way to see it. The other way to see it is that its horizon line and vanishing point is set to infinity, meaning that its edges would never end up meeting and converging into one single point. No horizon line and no vanishing point? How easier than that could it be? But hold on. It's not that simple. We distinguished an isometric drawing from a drawing with perspective, but any drawing without perspective isn't necessarily isometric. The isometric drawing belongs to a larger category. It belongs to the category of axonometric projections. Don't let this very complicated word fool you. It's actually a very simple concept, just like isometric drawings. An axonometric projection is any representations where the lines between the objects and the picture plane are parallel. There are 3 types of axonometric projection. The dimetric projection. This type of projection is most often used in video games. The trimetric projection and the isometric projection. The particularity of the isometric projection, as opposed to the 2 others, is that the 3 axes, x, y, and z, are equally foreshortened. In order for all these axes to be equally foreshortened, all the edges of the isometric shape have to be inclined at the same angle, an angle of 30 degrees, as shown in this drawing. This type of projection is often used by engineers and occasionally used by architects. They're also very often used by illustrators. In my opinion, they are a great touch if you want to make your drawing look futuristic, because of all the geometric aspect of it. So to summarize, there are 3 things that we want to keep in mind when making an isometric drawing. 1. The lines must be parallel to one another. 2. The edges have to be inclined at an angle of 30 degrees. And 3. The faces should have equal shortening. Now that we know what an isometric drawing is, we can move on to the next part, the drawing part. The way I like to start my drawings is to think about the story I want to tell and the mood I want to convey. This step is often overlooked at, but it actually is a crucial step. I kept it rather brief as this tutorial is focused on how to make an isometric illustration. So during this step, don't bother yourself trying to make things look isometric. Be as free as you can. The first thing you want to do is have an idea. What is the story that you want to tell through your drawing? If you're out of inspiration, you can look through photography websites, you can look at pictures on social medias, you can look at screenshots from a movie. I recommend looking at filmgrab.com. You can even go for a walk and observe people, scroll through old photos, memories, read poems, read a book, read a magazine. Really, you can find inspiration anywhere. Once you know the overall kind of mood or story that you want to tell, some other questions that you might want to ask yourself is, what time of the day is your story taking place? What time of the year? Is it cold outside? Is it happy? Is it scary? Is it mysterious? Who are the characters? That's a very important part. What are the names? Where are they from? How old are they? What are their personalities? Some people like to write everything down. I personally like to take notes. It really helps. And another thing I like to ask myself is, what message am I trying to convey? And who is the target audience? Once you kind of know what you want to say, you have an idea, then the next step is to start sketching everything. For this step, I recommend you to be as free as you want. Honestly, the more free you are, the more creative you'll get and the better sketches you'll get. You can sketch the characters, you can sketch the props, you can sketch little details, you can sketch anything you want that might be inspiration. I actually know a lot of people who like to do this step at the same time as they do the first step of thinking of the idea. It's really up to you, whatever you feel more comfortable with. During this phase, try not to be too judgmental of your work. The idea is to be as creative as possible, and some of your sketches might look terrible, but that's okay because nobody else apart from you will see it, and your final drawing will look nothing like your sketches. Think of it as a brainstorming phase. As you're getting drawings down on the paper, you might start to refine it more and more until you try to get your final composition. So at this point, some of the questions that you might be wanting to ask yourself is, what do you want the focus of your drawing to be? What is the center of attention? What composition tells the story better? What kind of angle should you use? What kind of shapes convey the emotion better? You know, if it's a very happy mood, maybe more circular shapes. Meanwhile, if it's a dangerous mood, maybe you want to include some sharps in there. You can start asking yourself things like that. While working on your sketches, you might want to pull out some references to make things easier. You might want to look at the way specific things look like in specific places to be more accurate. It might also help you with seeing a variety of shapes. These shapes could inspire you. You can also look at specific details. For my drawing personally, I looked at what European houses look like, what kind of trees and plants grew in specific climate, what color palette was more common during summertime, what kind of clothes a European gardener would wear. I remembered a few films that I saw that I liked some of the visuals in, and I pulled them out to look at it. So anyways, referencing and looking at different inspiration sources can be very beneficial. By the end of this step, you should have an idea of what you want your final drawing to look like. The idea is to have a rough sketch of your final composition, with or without color. It's completely up to you. I think it's important to note that your drawing might end up looking very different. The rough sketch, although it doesn't have to be isometric, should still keep in mind the idea of it. For example, don't make an extreme low shot, as this will make transforming it into an isometric sketch very complicated. Instead, try aiming for a high shot showing the three sides of the object. The next step is transforming your rough sketch into an isometric drawing. So I just want to remind you of the three things we have to keep in mind when making an isometric drawing. The lines must be parallel to one another, the edges have to be inclined at an angle of 30 degrees, and the three faces should have equal shortening. There are a number of methods that you can use in Clip Studio Paint to make an isometric drawing. After browsing a little bit, I found an existing tutorial on how to make an isometric drawing in Clip Studio Paint, to which I put the link down below. Steele shared a great method of approaching isometric drawings that I would totally recommend looking at. The method that I use is a bit different and might suit you better if you're looking for something a little bit more simple. First thing first, I recommend you to turn on the grid. It helps visualize things. You can do so very easily by going in the top setting and click on the option View, and then you will show up and just click on the grid option. To change the grid setting, simply go to File and then Preference, and then go to the option Ruler and Units. This might come in very handy later on. Then, make sure your rough drawing layer is turned on with a low opacity and is placed at the very top of your layer hierarchy. This makes the process 100 times easier. Some people like to set it as multiply, just to make sure that it will show up on top of any drawing you might do on the other layers. Next, look at your drawing and consider what the dominating shape of your drawing might be. This will be the base for building our drawing. In my example, the base of my drawing and the dominating shape is the shape of the house. For some other people, it might be the floor, the base of the floor. It might be a building, it might be a book, a car, a boat, anything. Basically the biggest, the most obvious, and the most central shape of your drawing. Once you have that all set up, we can start building. There is essentially 4 steps to my process. The first one is to set up your polygon. Next one is to place your parallel users. And then it is to trace the shape using the ruler that you've placed. And the last step is to outline the visible line of your structure with the brush tool to make the sketch very easy to read. I don't think it could be any more simple, but let me get into the details. Let's open the polygon tool in the shape tool menu. In the tool properties, make sure the aspect type is set that the width is equal to the height. This will ensure that all the edges of our cube are the same length. This step is essential. When you are ready, place the polygon shape on a new layer to fit the shape of your dominating shape. Naturally, it won't match the shape exactly, since we might be shifting the perspective. I call this layer the base. Now, the reason why the polygon tool is so marvelous for making isometric drawing is that a polygon shape with edges that are all the same length is a perfect 3-dimensional cube that respects all the conditions of an isometric projection. For the next step, we're going to create 3 new layers, one for each axis: the Z, the X, and the Y axis. It might help to associate each of them to a different color. To each layer, we will assign a parallel ruler tool corresponding to the axis. The parallel ruler tool can be found under the ruler tool, special tool, under the label parallel line. Another handy thing to do is to set the step of angle at 30 in the parallel tool properties. This way, the ruler will snap when at 30 degrees angle, making it very accurate for the angles to measure exactly 30 degrees. Once you've placed your 3 rulers, all you have to do is go back and forth between these layers to build the structural shapes of your drawing with the pen, brush, or the pencil tool. At this point, it doesn't matter which tool you use between those 3, and you might actually want to add some fancy textures to it. That is no problem. It helps to have a specific color assigned to each axis. For example, for all the vertical lines, I would go to the layer x-axis and draw all the lines that are vertical. Because the parallel ruler tool is turned on, this process is so easy. With the brush tool, I then outlined in black on a new layer all the important visible lines of my drawing. I used the function Shift, Hold, and then Let Go to make straight line with the pen tool. And there you go! Following these steps, you should have the structure of your isometric drawing set and ready to go for the next step, painting. As you can see, the structure of my drawing doesn't include any detail. I kept the details on a rough layer to use as reference while I paint. We can finally move on to the last step, making the final painting and putting in the colors. I think painting lineless fits the aesthetic of an isometric drawing very nicely, as well as using geometric shapes, which is why I decided to take this approach. My coloring process is very straightforward, and you can apply it to any type of painting that you want. The tools that I use are the following. The Polyline Selection tool, found in the tool menu under Selection Area, Polyline. It is a very versatile tool and allows you to correct your mistakes so easily. It is so much better than in any other software I've used so far. Then I have the Bucket tool, found in the menu. Its shortcut is G, but I like to use the shortcut Alt-Delete. It does the same thing, but I find it to be a bit cleaner. Then I find the Clip to the Layer Below tool very, very useful. It is found above the layer menu. And finally, I also use the Lock Transparent Pixel tool. Another tool that I use a lot is the brush tool, the very famous brush tool that I use for applying textures. So the first step for coloring is to block all the main colors for all the main shapes, each in a different layer. Set the opacity of the structure layer very low. You want it to be there for reference, but you don't want it to be overwhelming. Start by creating a new layer and naming it according to the object you're painting. I find it very helpful to name layers as I work, or else it gets really confusing because I like to work with a lot of different layers. So it's very essential. Then, using the Polyline tool, select the outline of the object that you're painting. If you want to go for a less geometrical look and a more curved look, you don't have to use the Polyline tool, you can use the Lasso tool or any other selection tool, up to you. Once your shape is selected, go to the color wheel and choose the color that you want it to be. Keep in mind that you can change that very easily later. And then once you are happy with that color, just press Alt Delete or the bucket tool. It's up to you. If you're not happy with how the color looks, just select another color and press Alt Delete again. And there you have it, your first shape. Now you can do the same thing for each of your shapes. For overlapping shapes, instead of precisely selecting around the previous shape, a way to save a lot of time is to use the Clip to Layer Below tool. As you can see, I use it quite often. Another tip to change color very fast is to select a shape, for example, the grass or the roof or even the walls, and then pressing the key Lock Transparent Pixel, which is found right on top of the layer menu, and then use the shortcut Alt Delete to switch the color. And this way you can just decide to recolor the whole painting in a matter of minutes. So there you go. At this point I have blocked in all the colors. Once that is over and you're happy with the colors, you can go through the same process but applying details. To keep it simple to change the colors later on, remember to put each color shape on its own layer. In the video I have cut a part of the detail making of because it was running very long and I thought it was a little bit boring, but don't worry, I have included some more of the later details so you can look at the way I did it. At the same time as you are applying detail, you can also start to apply different effects to your painting. You can easily do that by playing around with different brushes. I like to download brushes online and from artists that I really like. I found out that you can use brushes from Photoshop as well and import them directly into Clip Studio Paint, which is very handy. I spent a lot of time playing around with brushes, especially in this piece because I was trying to get different textures for the different plants. So it's worth playing around. Another thing you can try and experiment with is applying different modes to your layers. I like to use the multiply filter, the add glow one, and the overlay one. They're great for adding light effect or shadow effects. And finally, the last step that is completely optional is adding different filters to modify the colors. The one I often use is color balance and hue saturation and contrast. These filters can be found under the top menu bar layer under the label new correction layer. Yes, so you can have fun experimenting with those. And that's it, my isometric drawing is done. I have guided you through all the steps, and I hope you now have a beautiful drawing and that you've learned something from my video. If there's something you didn't understand or you would want to ask more questions about, feel free to leave a comment and I will make sure to answer it. I hope you learned something. And if you have any suggestion for me how to improve my painting, let me know. I would love that. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.